afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Stefan Schweinfest. I'm the director of the UN Statistics Division. And if you thought that the 53rd session of the Statistical Commission was over, think again. Here we are still going with side events. We had a fantastic session and a report was just shared with all of you yesterday. And the side events are always an important feature of the Statistical Commission because the Commission nowadays has so many topics to discuss that we cannot always do justice to all the important things and new things that are going on. And this network of economic statisticians is one of the new and innovative things of doing business. So we thought that in addition to the 20 or 30 minutes that we had time to discuss it during the formal commission session, where the work program, the idea and the concept were wholeheartedly and enthusiastically adopted and approved, we take an hour and a half to think a little bit more or present a little bit more. What is this idea of the network of economic statisticians? Where is it coming from? Where is it right now? And where is it going? So hence the title, Introduction of the United Nations Network of Economic Statisticians, Past, Present, and Future Activities. So, and who better than the elected designated chair of the network, one of the co-chairs, Greg Peterson from Statistics Canada, to lead us into what is the network. And we will have 3 presentations in session 1 that give a little bit the background of mostly where are we coming from and what have we done already. And then we will have in session 2 a panel discussion on some of the questions that are currently being discussed or maybe discussed in the near future. And we hope that this would be interactive with all of you, people out there who may not have had a chance to participate in any of the events, and give you, whet your appetite to become part of this in the future. So that's the stated objective. And I think we have also a Slido poll to make it more participatory. I think it, if I saw this correctly, it was sent to participants yesterday, and we may be able to put the link into the chat in case people haven't participated. So there it is. You see, the modern world functions very well. So if you haven't participated, you can click on it and perhaps answer the questions that are there, and that could give our panelists some ideas of what the colleagues out there in the world think about some of the topics. So without further ado, we start with session 1, introduction of the network, and I have the pleasure and honor to give the floor to our dear colleague and friend Greg, who has not only taken the responsibility of being the co-chair of the network for the first years, but has also done an enormous amount of groundwork to get us all to where we are right now. So thank you for that, Greg, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan, for the kind introduction. I'm going to put a few slides on the screen, and I trust everybody can see that. Thank you all for making time today to attend this side event. My objective this morning, or my objective today, is to very quickly set the stage and lay the groundwork for the presentations that are going to follow by describing what is this network of economic statisticians, what it is that we're driving to do, and ultimately soliciting for your help and collaboration in helping us to move our agenda forward. You may recall that coming out of the 52nd session of the Statistical Commission, we had tabled the Friends of the Chair report on the future of economic statistics. And coming out of that was a desire to establish a network of economic statisticians that would focus on kind of a few themes. one being networking, sort of increased collaboration and user consultation. There was a desire to transform and challenge the existing system of economic statistics, looking at things like statistical infrastructure, operations, and data solutions. There was a desire to take a look at sort of better enabling sort of institutional arrangements and sort of fixing some issues relating to governance. And finally, a very strong desire to experiment, integrate, and improve documentation of kind of the existing statistical frameworks and methods. So in short, sort of a desire to bring people together to sort of focus on what I like to call kind of the 4 C's: coordination, cooperation, collaboration, and possibly co-investment. But the idea is sort of bringing national statistical offices and others together in a collaborative type framework, not necessarily creating an additional layer of governance. So the drive was to try to do things better, but try to do it in a very nimble and in an agile way. So the objective of the network is just that, right? Setting a structure, setting a framework that would allow us to, improve that coordination, cooperation, co-investment, and kind of working together to try to rise the tide for all players, if you will. Our modus operandi is sort of a little bit different from kind of the traditional model of sort of committees and task forces. Over the course of the past year, we've been working on how we would kind of establish ourselves and how we would structure ourselves. And you will hear over the course of today the notion of thematic sprints. Thematic sprints sort of along with kind of user consultation to drive kind of a program forward. The idea behind these thematic sprints is, rather than setting up a task team that would exist for sort of a long period of time, we would focus our efforts onto, particular areas, spend a fixed period of time sort of trying to address that issue, and then, spinning out kind of a conclusion that, that could be sent to sort of other existing committees, task teams, or bodies, or informing a continued body of work. A good example of that is the first sprint that we had as a network, which was our organizational sprint, which was launched in December and concluded kind of early this calendar year. And this was the sprint that established our terms of reference, our governance structure, and our work plan. And we were able to achieve this over the course of 4 2 to 2.5 hour meetings that took place, I guess, over the course of 4 months. So with a meager investment of sort of 9 to 10 meeting hours, we were able to achieve just that, right? The establishment of a terms of reference, the establishment of a governance structure, the idea of a forward-looking work plan, as well as kind of the establishment of our modus operandi and the rest of it. This is a model that we're applying to other areas. You will hear very shortly about the thematic sprints that have just been launched on beyond GDP measures of well-being. But in addition to that, this week we'll be concluding a session of another sprint on dealing with acquisition of data around global value chains. And you'll hear about that a little bit later as well. But again, the idea here is to very nimbly, identify an issue, stand up a group of sort of willing partners, bring together experts from within and outside kind of the national statistical systems, and then drive to a conclusion rapidly, and sort of lead to an outcome again that will either result in work going to either existing bodies or if we need a follow-up sort of activity to dive more deeply into a particular area, that is what we'll do. So in terms of our modus operandi, in terms of our work plan, in terms of where we're going to go, We see these thematic sprints as being kind of I guess kind of operational activity that kind of drives kind of the network forward. We've identified a range. Well, we have launched a range of initial sprints, as I mentioned, dealing with data access beyond GDP and organization. Concurrent with that, there's coming out of the Friends of the Chair report, coming out of the discussion at last year's Statistical Commission, sort of a desire to make sure that we have a statistical system that responds well to user needs. So we will be undertaking over the course of the year sort of a range of user consultations, kind of in cooperation with regional commissions, sort of a range of user consultations to understand, sort of user needs and where there are demands for us to kind of drive the system forward. All of this will lead to a capstone event later this calendar year, so the Global Forum on Economic Statistics, which will focus on the revisions to the S&A and Balance of Payments manuals. The session will be organized by Eurostat with the UN Statistical Commission, with support from sort of the. Yes.
Great. Sorry for interrupting. Can you change your slides to the slideshow mode? Yeah.
According to my screen, I have.
Your slides are not moving, so that's the problem.
Okay. I'll reload the slides. Is that better, Benson?
Sorry, can you please change the slideshow? Yeah, slideshow.
Yep, and that's good. That's what I've done. Can you see it now? Benson, can you see the slideshow?
Now it was moving
we are
to the
seeing the
second.
link in the network activities together.
Oh, yes.
This is the fourth slide.
Yeah.
Presentation.
Okay. I apologize for that. Well, one would hope that PowerPoint and Teams work seamlessly, but luck and its twisted sister fate prevents that from happening. So over the course of the next year, we will be undertaking a range of user consultations, which will lead to a capstone event sort of this fall. And while it will be focused on sort of user feedback on where we're at in terms of revisions to the S&A and Balance of Payments manual, it will afford us an opportunity to take a look at so what's not being covered by the revisions of those manuals, and again driving forward kind of the work of the network. So we have a range of initial sprints, we have a range of user consultations. We will look at launching new sprints over the course of the year. We have identified a number of thematic issues that are of interest to members, things like digitalization and technological innovation, urbanization, climate change, demographic shifts, inequality, informal economy. Making this work, however, will require sort of volunteers to help lead and participate in these sprints. So in the very near term, we're going to try to identify sort of volunteers to make that happen. And we're looking at a structure that's iterative in nature. So as we undertake these user consultations, as we undertake our sprints, that should drive an agenda forward, and it will allow us to kind of revise a work plan. So ideally, we have say 2 to 3 year rolling work plan that we adjust as user requirements change. I'll wrap up here just by saying that to date, I think we've shown that this model is successful. We're able to stand up a subject matter in very short order. We're able to work on it in various aspects, and I think we demonstrate, I think, in the organizational sprint the ability to derive outcomes with relatively low investment and with some degree of nimbleness and speed. In terms of short-term objectives, as I mentioned, we've identified thematic issues that were of interest, and we're going to look for volunteers to help sort of stand those up. At the same time, we'll set up monitoring mechanisms in order to kind of sort of nurture this structure and ensure broad sharing of information coming from these sprints. And finally, we're going to work to promote the network as a means to find solutions to emerging priority issues. And this workshop or this side event is first, and I hope a series of many to try to bring people together to communicate, collaborate, and again, better allow us to do our jobs. With that, Stefan, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you very much for your time. Again, I apologize for the technical issues.
Thank you very much, Greg. I mean, you are the pioneer of pioneers, launching the whole enterprise, and I have two more pioneers lined up right behind you. That's Rob and Eric, who have been taking the lead on our first two thematic sprints. And without further ado, I will invite them to inform us where we are with that. And I would invite first Mr. Rob van Kaan from Statistics Netherlands to introduce, who is the lead of the data access sprint, to introduce this topic. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and good day, everyone. And indeed, it was quite innovating to do this because it was all new. And when we started the first sprint, we didn't know what came out, and we even didn't know what the second and the third and the fourth sprint contained. So it was great to do. And the fourth sprint is this week, I think on Wednesday. And I think it was a great success. And first of all, I want to thank you, Stefan, for opening our first sprint session, but also the close collaboration with the UNCBD and the network of economic statisticians. And much appreciations for the support we received from all of you. And when we started, we had some goals, and the first goal was to raise awareness regarding issues when measuring global value change. The second one was to build some blocks of negotiation strategy to gain access to this privately held data, establishment of community of practices, and the last one was to make a roadmap for the future. So how are we going to do this? And this is also the subject of our last sprint. What also quite positive forward that we rotated the chairs. Mohammed Hassan, Juan Daniel, and the last one from Dominic Roskreutz chaired the different sprint sessions, and that shows that it's not only something from the UN or Statistics Netherlands, but for the entire statistical world. And I think that was very good to make it something from all of us. There were 62 countries that participated, and 13 international organizations who participate from both developing and developed countries. Also, there were representation from data scientists, economic statisticians, and higher management. And using the combination of plenary polls and small breakout rooms, everyone was able to take an active role in the sprint sessions. I think we had quite interesting speakers from the World Bank, from the Duke University, the UN Global Compact, Eurostat, UNCTAD, but also from the private world. Such as ASML, that's a great chip maker, Panjiva and Floridata, who are in the flower industry. And at last, the lessons we learned so far, and like I said, we aren't finished yet, but every global value chain is different, and therefore one negotiation strategy won't fit at all of them. The second is the global value chains are considered important to gain more insights in environmental footprint, distribution of fair labor and the contribution to national income and GDP. Much unknown about the network of the companies which form a value chain. So we need more insight in this value, and this is very valuable for both the NSI as well the private sector. And the last one is there is quite a willingness and interest to collaborate with us from the private sector, and that is very interesting. So there's an opportunity we have to investigate in the near future. So I think it was quite a success, but a lot of work to do, and it's nice to see that this is not ending with the last sprint. So there are many opportunities we can do further work on our community. So thank you, Stefan.
No, thank you, Rob, and your team for diving in and taking the risky road of the first sprint. I was there at the very beginning, and I'm threatening to be there tomorrow at the end. And the people who've heard this, you may have heard that there is the final session of the data access sprint tomorrow. So if you sometimes get the impression that this is a little bit of an advertising campaign here today, it is by purpose. So if we whet your appetite and you want to hear more about data access, and you like, for instance, in the Americas, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, we will have the final and concluding session of the, I hope I said that right, at 7 tomorrow. We will have the concluding session of the data access sprint. Now, the second sprint we chose as the key topic to venture into the area of cutting edge issues is beyond GDP. And here Eric has taken the lead. So Eric, the floor is yours to introduce us to this stream of work.
Okay, excellent, Stefan. Thanks very much, and good day, everyone. I'll just wait a moment while Benson shares our slides. And just confirming everyone can see the slide deck. Wonderful. And so good day, everyone. Thanks so much. This is on behalf of Richard Hayes and myself. We will be talking a bit about what we've done in our first session of the Beyond GDP Sprint, as well as what is ahead. Next slide, please. Benson, did that? Yeah, okay. Excellent. Okay, excellent. So you can see here we have 5 sessions planned for the Beyond GDP Sprint. On March 10th, we held a session on modern capital, and that is looking at the various types of capital that are part of the system of national accounts and that are also on the frontier of the system of national accounts. And I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. Sessions 2 and 3 of our Beyond GDP Sprint are forthcoming, and they are on distributional accounts and well-being initiatives. And so the point here is to talk about some of the work that is core to the current SNA update, as well as thinking about issues around the environment and well-being, and in particular thinking about, as we extend things, the Fitouszi, Stiglitz, and Durant extensions to well-being. The 4th session is designed to focus on population, society, and well-being. Here, we're going to bring together socio-demographic disaggregations of national accounts, vulnerability index, HDI index, and a variety of other UN initiatives. And then we'll have a final 5th session where we will synthesize and wrap up and think about what our next steps are. Next slide, please. Great. On March 10th, we held our session on modern capitals. And so the focus here is if we wish to use inclusive wealth type measures, we need measures of capital to be consistent and coherent. And so in a modern economy, what do capitals look like, and how can we measure their stocks and flows? So the scope of work is to focus on various types of modern capital, measurement techniques, think about ownership versus use, and to think about the various characteristics of capitals. Next slide, please. We had a robust session. You can see here, capitals are currently caught in a wide variety of statistical domains. So they cross over the demographic and social statistics, the economic statistics, the environment, and multi-domain statistics. And so here, again, the focus was on a variety of capitals. And I will talk in a moment about some of our conclusions. Next slide, please. Beyond GDP has to capture the implications of degradation and loss of assets. So we have to focus here on net measures, in particular, thinking about getting depreciation and deterioration correct. There are overlaps and gaps in definitions which prevent coherent use, particularly in relation to human capital, intangibles, and the measurement of land. We had a robust discussion around environmental issues as part of our March 10th session. There are a number of valuations and value concepts we have to get right to measure capitals correctly. And there are, of course, always different approaches to measure capital, some of which might be more impactful or more meaningful for the core S&A type issues, and others might be more on the frontier that we need to be thinking about. And those capitals outside the productive economy may not have an exchange valuation, and therefore may need other types of pricing methods. And so these were some of the high-level takeaways from this first session on modern capitals. And when we get to our 5th session, we'll be thinking about how we can move this work forward. Next slide, please. Upcoming is our sprint, or I should say our session on distributional accounts and well-being. And so, of course, what we know is that macro statistics such as headline GDP figures, employment and unemployment, we feature these within our domestic economies to give a sense of what the economic outlook looks like. Yet these aggregates by themselves are unable to shed light on how different groups of households are affected by these phenomena. Now, there's considerable work taking place across international organizations, national statistical offices, and central banks. And so part of this session is to amplify those efforts, to share experiences and best practices, and to think about what our future options look like to extend these initiatives. Next slide, please. We are breaking up our distributional accounts and well-being sessions into 2 parts. Part 1 is to focus on core S&A research examples. And here the focus really is to level set, if you will, on what the current initiatives are to establish a baseline for the Part 2 session, which is focused on moving beyond the core toward the frontier of well-being initiatives. And in that second session, we're thinking about inclusive wealth and measurement of inclusive wealth, as well as other extended well-being initiatives. And of course, we will also have a closeout to this session where we think about the way forward. Next slide, please. On March 24th, we'll have the first session on distributional accounts, where we have currently 3 speakers lined up with a call for further participants. We'll hear from Jorrit Zoetingberg of the OECD on the expert group on disparities in the National Accounts Framework. We'll hear from Pierre Sola on the expert group on linking macro and micro data for household sectors. This is getting at financial or wealth distributions. And we'll hear an example from the United States, as well as ideally a couple of other country examples. And those calls for participations have been put forward, and some feedback is flowing in, which we very much appreciate. Next slide, please. On April 5th, we'll begin with a presentation by Fabrice Merton of the OECD's WISE Center, where we'll be talking about the Inclusive Wealth Initiative and other activities of OECD WISE. And here we also have a call for country perspectives. Next slide, please. And then as we move forward into the month of April, on the 21st, we'll hear about a variety of initiatives taking place at the UN level that affect population, society, and well-being. And we believe here we again will have a call for further participation. As of course, as part of this this session on April 21st, we'll hear about our common agenda that's been put forward by the United Nations Secretary General on Beyond GDP, which is, as we understand it, a very high priority within the UN. We'll be hearing about a number of other important initiatives that are related. Next slide, please. And so again, I thank you for your time. Richard Hayes and I have very much appreciated that there are many folks who are interested and eager to participate in the Beyond GDP session, and we look forward to where this session goes into the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Eric. And again, many opportunities also here to participate in the remaining sessions of the sprint. So in a way, I think with these 3 introductory presentations, we have perhaps answered the first two ambitions in our title, namely past and present. Where are we coming from, Greg's presentation, and where are we currently in the middle of these two thematic sprints? And now I have the pleasure to move on to the second session, which is a panel discussion with a number of distinguished representatives from around the world, all parts of the world, from east to west, as it's usually the case here in the United Nations. So some of them will be sharing us for breakfast, others will be having us for dinner here. I will lead our panelists into the discussion with a leading question and give them an opportunity to react to that. And but if you have any questions, please use the chat. And I will also, even though we have divided the topics a little bit, then also give other panelists, after we have done the first round, to comment on some aspects that maybe a colleague has talked about that they would like to expand on or ask a question and be interactive. So this is the design for the second part of this event. My first question would be on the topic of privately held data to Mohammed. I am only not entirely sure I have seen Mohammed in the... Mohammed, are you here with us? Don't want to ask you a question if you're not. That makes it a bit difficult to answer. I don't think we have Mohammed here, so why don't we then move on in my my questions for the panel to the second. Let me define the order here. I will invite Dominic, Shauda, Juan Daniel, and then Jackie to intervene so that you have advance warning. You know when the train is coming your way. And let's then start with Dominic and the issue of global investment in user consultation for fast discovery and diffusion of new methods and technologies. I mean, we all know the issue of technological advances. I mean, what is happening all around us. And in many areas, new data, access to new data. And so question to you, Dominic, and I hope Dominic is with us. Dominic, I saw you earlier. Yeah, I see you. You are right there. Would there be an opportunity, in your opinion, to leverage more broadly among national statistical offices these advances in modern technology and improve the efficiency of statistical operations as well as the quality and the timeliness of statistics? One of the network's objectives is to support capacity building, networking, and diffusion of new technologies and data solutions. Therefore, how could the network enable the discovery of these new developments and the rapid diffusion of the newly acquired knowledge and technologies across national statistical organizations? Dominic, and we have the poll here also. That's interesting. Thank you for bringing that in. So the question that how can the network enable and share new developments and rapid diffusion of newly acquired knowledge, the same question was asked to the audience, and here we have the elements of the answer, which you are welcome to take into account, but I mean also, answer from your perspective. So Dominic, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and it's a honor to be here today with all of you. And the question is brilliant, and I want to warn you that I'm going to speak about it like for 2 hours now. I'm kidding, of course, but it's really a very profound question, and it's profound because there's a lot of things that we may cover while trying to answer it. Yeah, I'd like to start first of all. If you want to leverage something, that you need to have it at the beginning, you know. But there we are in a situation that we have it. there are a lot of advances done in the area. I mean, we have a United Nations community of experts in big data. Within this, we have a task force in training capacity building, which I'm chairing. That's why I mentioned it. Sorry. And we have a high-level group, on modernization of social statistics under the aegis of UNECE and a machine learning group. Well, then we do a lot of, within Europe, underneath, together with the Eurostat. I don't want to mention things like of a general, importance, like task force on access and privately held data, or task force on amending our basic, European regulation and statistics. We have also ESSnet. I'm going to say a few words about it. But finally, many countries are doing a lot of themselves, like not to mention UK ONS Data Science Campus that is famous in our area. I would say it's tremendous amount of work they do. Well, many projects in the United Arab Emirates I wasn't aware of a few years ago. Or what do we do domestically here in Poland as well in terms of the imagery, satellite imagery, or any kind of like streaming sources to produce real-time statistics. So to be more specific in terms of leveraging, I would like to provide you with a few examples. This one good example that I have in my mind is an example of bridging initiatives. The ESSnet. ESS stands for European Statistical System. That's the name we use together within the European Union. And it's called ESSnet Web Intelligence Network Project, which gathers 17 European NSIs led by our office, Statistics Poland, who work hand in hand with Eurostat in developing solutions to integrate web data in statistical production. What is important, and I want to stress this fact, that this overall framework of projects has already established, and we're very proud of that. That was actually one of the aims, and is extending links to academia. So I want to forcefully say about the importance of having the strong ties with our stakeholders, and academia is of course the first one, but also it extends to cooperate with such organization as again United Nations community on big data or the IMF. And that since training and competency building is one of the activities to be undertaken, the goal is to enable broadest possible access to them. Another good example, excellent example, I think, of attempt to leverage the advancements in the realm of the new methods, tools, and data sources, the machine learning group initiated as the UNECE project, and then continued as a joint effort of the ONS, UK ONS, and the UN Conference of European Statisticians, and it's named ML Group now. There has been an immense knowledge transfer within this, actually voluntary initiative. It appears that NSIs are looking forward to getting involved and learning from each other within this framework. Importantly, we see first attempts to link the work of the ML Group to the developments of the United Nations CEBD, this community of experts in big data, so which is very important, which is a very good sign. So there are already very good examples in place which create an opportunity to leverage more broadly the possibility of using new methods, tools, and techniques. There is already a lot of resources. However, in my view, most statistical organizations are not at the forefront of leveraging machine learning or optimization yet. I tend to believe that most NSIs, if we take a broad perspective of the statistical community, are struggling to employ these advances, and there is already a moderate number of leading NSIs who manage to excel in this field. It appears that the majority of NSIs lack adequate competencies in three areas: in widely understood data science, and then in adequate infrastructure and technology, and finally, probably the most important, on strategic issues, on strategy, which would lead them into the place where they want to be. So we have to remember that, for example, dealing with new data sources, which sets an obvious trend nowadays, is an extremely demanding process for official statistics. To give you an example, while we excluded the cases of production of price statistics with private data from the recent in-depth report that we have done for the UNECE on the review on collaboration with the private sector, as the use of these data seems almost universal in Europe. I mean, the scanner data for price statistics, at the workshop with the regional hubs led by UN CEBD task team on training at the UN event in Expo 2020, showed it clearly that even such seemingly well-explored field of scanner data is still beyond the reach of numerous NSIs outside the leading ones. So that's something that we have to take as a challenge. So leveraging these advances is key, but at the same time, it's a challenge. So clearly, the good side of all of that is the progress we make on total image is okay. Yet two issues are arising, no matter the fact we know them and already try to address them. First is we progress in general or in total, as I would say, but do we progress collectively together? That's the first challenge. The second challenge is no matter the efforts we do, there is some fragmentation that need to be still addressed looking from the global perspective. And then I'm just going to close my intervention with trying to answer the question, how could the network, of economic statisticians enable the discovery, that the thing that I've been asked for, exactly how this all already started. I mean, there are two dimensions. First is facing inwards. So we need those sprints, workshops, seminars, direct collaboration, support for measures to improve inclusiveness, because we risk creating an exclusive collapse of the most advanced, for example. We should try to mitigate this risk. And the second dimension would be facing outwards. I mean, strengthening external stakeholders' relations, closer ties, not just general cooperation or one-off collaboration projects. We need to extend to the community outside our own. And this is exactly the advantage I see the network can have. I mean, the advantages are the global position, which is important for the innovation. Collectively, you can gain more innovation, but also the global outreach that the UN has, which is important for inclusion. So I would say, just to have a kind of a bon mot, as they say in French, so not just leave no one behind, but try to put everyone in front. So let's change the paradigm. So our voice together at this level may be heard better because we cannot make it alone, and we need our stakeholders to support us. So I don't want to take too much time, but I would like to again point your attention to the work that has been done by the task team for training, competencies, and capacity building under the aegis of the community of experts on big data. There's been a lot of fantastic work. I don't want to just spend time describing that, but there is something that we can start with, and there's certainly a huge potential in front of us, and I'm very much looking forward for the coming months.
Thank you, Dominic. And there's nothing wrong with talking for 2 hours. It betrays your passion about the topic. And I wanted to apologize to each and every one. I'm a terrible chair. I never introduce you with your titles. And Dominic is, of course, the president of Statistics Poland. But let me just say once and for all, you have the note and the background note on the screen on the website, so you know who the people are. And let me assure you, all of them are extremely competent. They are extremely eloquent, as you will find out for yourself, and they are also very nice people to work with. So if I forget somebody's title, please forgive me. I'm glad to see that Mohammed has joined us now. This is good because, I mean, the two topics of what Dominic was talking about, the new technologies and the first topic, access to privately held data, are very closely linked to each other. So, Mohammed, if it's okay with you, we will return to you and ask you the question about the facilitating data access. We all know how much data there is out there in the hands of the private sectors. And how can we, the question is now, partnerships between national statistical offices and private companies. How do we do that? So to develop such partnerships, do you think that it would be desirable to develop a set of international principles for access to privately held data, which would be shared and supported globally by governments and private sector leaders? What broad categories of issues surrounding public-private partnerships, the other PPP, would these principles address, and is there a role for the network in promoting the formulation of such principles? Mohammed from UAE, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan. My apologies, I have a couple of technical issues to join. Well, it's very interesting. Before we go into maybe formalizing any principle when it comes to access privately held data from private sector or even from governments, I have to say I had the pleasure actually to be part of the global sprint on data session last month. And it was interesting to see a few consensus and maybe I would say 4 main points that most of the member who were discussing, they agreed on. One, there is an agreement that digital economy and e-commerce framework needs to be blended in the national account because 90% of all the new data, it's being produced last 2 years. And when I say 90%, based on Forbes, there is the data that has been produced by humanities, it's around 2.4 quintillion bytes of data, which is 18 zeros. And imagine most of this is actually now the online transaction and actually the online trade. And to make that worse, a lot of people say it's actually using blockchain, which we as a statisticians will say blockchain, that's mean it's decentralized. And decentralized is a huge word that I will cover in a bit. Second is most of the members agree that data sharing model needs to be balanced and guarantee safeguard to access data. Third, a good communication with the private sector, such as the big company like Google, Facebook, and others. But the fourth one that I will highlight a bit more into it right now is a lot of them said there has to be a legal framework and to access and analyze these big data. And the word which is being mentioned that there has to be a legal or a strong worded and legal framework to allow accessing the data from businesses. Now, we as a government or we as NSOs, we like to put legal frameworks, we like to put policies and all these things. But when it comes to private sector today, the entire world is moving toward decentralizations. Similar to the blockchain, for example, where we don't have access to the data, where actually we don't know who is the producer of the data, but we can see transactions. And you look at the data today, most of these data are on the cloud or on the internet. So many of these points is very important. The reason is that when we say is that we need legal principle or legal framework to access the data, is one, once we put such legal framework, which is strongly worded, the private sector actually will not open the business in the country because they don't want to jeopardize the competitiveness of their business with others. And in order to really measure the access, or in order to really have a better access to the data, most of the members says we need to have a proper collaborations. We need to really work closely with them. And this is where I think the UN statistical teams, they've agreed in using a lot of global working groups, and that allow access to data. So what I've seen today is some successful cases and some really failed cases when it comes to accessing the data from private sectors and also from the government. Now, if I take the first part, accessing data from private sectors, we love to have household data. We love to have transaction data for our CPIs. We like to have the new digital economy data, which is really not yet even in terms of agreeing on the methodology is not yet been agreed on, but we want to have these data. And as much as we start putting legal frameworks, we're still not able to access that. And if we put it that, and if we put legal frameworks, it's gonna take years, similar to what we've seen in the past. So there are a couple of case scenarios that is being done by the global working teams on on collaborating with the private sector, similar to Google, similar to the mobile access of data, which shows a successful scenarios. So sometimes when we say principles in a legal format, I don't think it's gonna work. We need a little bit to change that legal format. End of the day, the owner of the data, or I would say the higher majority of data owners are private sector, are not government anymore. I would ask every single of you, now, how do you do your transaction? Do you do transaction with the government more or actually with the private sectors? When you use your taxis, is it Uber or actually is the government taxis? When you trade today, now most of the trading happen through blockchain. The reason is that because of COVID, what happened last 2 years, we have more surface on the cloud, and we start doing lots of transaction on the cloud, and that's actually increased one point. I mean, there was a gentleman who said there is a disruption when it comes to data on the cloud. The reason is that every time we have a bigger surface on the cloud, criminal cyber securities, it's compromised, and cyber criminal have more access to data. And you know what they like more is the cryptocurrencies, because you can't trace who's that person. So imagine this flow, and the entire world is moving toward actually decentralization. Is no more centralizations. The bank's gonna have big issues today, because most transaction, you don't need the bank to do it right now. We can see the back door, which is similar to the internet. So there was an interesting really debate of, shall we really go with the principle? From my opinion and from what we've heard with from the members, I think legal principle will now work with the private sectors, because they are so big today. They are bigger than government. They even control certain countries' economies. So when we talk about transportations, when we talk about adding a digital economy to a country whereby private sector are bigger than governments, you don't have access to the data. So from our point perspective, I think the legal principle needs to be really revised. There was an interesting also case I would like to cover, is the Sdg Data Hub. And I think this is one of the most successful collaboration between private sectors and public sector in terms of data sharing, because they use this concept of system to systems. And what happened is that the private information is already being a kind of not shared, but all the data is being shared. So today, when we are measuring the SDGs, you could see that there are a lot of collaboration in terms of sharing data. So we can see companies like Esri, companies like Google, they've shared their mobile data during the pandemic. So, you know, leaving no one behind, I think this is one of the most successful scenario that we need to take it forward with the private sector. So I would use the Sdg Data Hub that is being done by the United Nations Statistical Commission, and drive that principle, I would say, not legal principle, but the same principle, the same model of system to system data integrations that we already saw the result. So look at the Sdg Data Hub today, you could see the integration of the entire world together from private sector and even from public sector, without the compromise of the data competitions between private sectors. An interesting scenario is when we had the launch of the UAE regional hubs in UAE, we met Carrefour. Of course, everyone knows Carrefour, one of the biggest retailers, or the supermarket, the large one. And you know what they mentioned? They said, we are willing to share the data, but we'll give you the final data, and actually we'll teach you how to, or are actually, they said, we can share the capacity building part from our side. The reason is that they say government don't know how to deal with big data, and that's accurate, because we as a government, or NSOs, I would say, is we love to have the detail of all the data. And the private sector, they don't work that way. They have a totally different model when it comes to analyzing big data. And they said they are willing even to join. But you know, one interesting part, what they said is, they said, we don't know about the UN Global Platform, for example. So we need to market ourselves really better with the private sectors. They says, we are willing to share all the retailer data with you. You don't need actually to go and ask, you know, for the CPI data, we can share it directly with you. But you need to find a model where we have this collaboration with the governments to share this data. So again, I go back to the SDGs Data Hub that give us an open data using geospatial data with different indicators. And we were able to map details of from a country to another country, where even we can use the trading between countries. So that's another, I would say, layer of collaborations. The other part is we really need to have a better marketing of the United Nations global working teams with the private sectors. A collaboration needs to be now in a bigger scales beyond the telecommunication or beyond one private sectors. No, there has to be kind of consortium with all the bigger players in the market today that will really help us to change the way that we collect the indicators for statistical, by using really the big data indicator to replace a few of the of the statistical indicator. So that's in a nutshell, I would say, a brief of principle. I know I did not really, Stefan went to the legal principle, because honestly, from my humble opinion, I don't see it working when it comes to the private sectors. They want a bit of a freedom. They love decentralization. They don't want centralizations anymore when it comes to sharing of data. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And you can already see the passion that all of our panelists bring to the topic, to the table, and to the topics here. And thank you for sharing your experiences in the UAE also. And you've been a partner of our office for many years now with the organization of the World Data Forum and the regional hub for big data. And thank you also for sharing your experiences. Yes, and I do believe you. I mean, if we start working with the private sector, the first thing after saying welcome should not be regulation, regulation, regulation and straitjackets, but we need to be a little bit more open and also learn their language and their tools. It's not only about data, as you rightly reminded us, but also the ability to use their skills and tap into this new wealth of how to do things. This takes us right to the next topic, the definition of digital economy. And Shauda, I see you smile already. That's great. There was a lot of discussion of digitalization and digital economy. And of course, even the pandemic has probably accelerated this. But perhaps this is the moment to ask ourselves, given the fact that digitalization has progressed rapidly and is now embedded in every aspect of our lives, and economies related to work, education, access to medical services, manufacturing, trade, agriculture, etc., is it still relevant to come up with a definition of digital economy that is statistically measurable and analytically useful? If you think that is the case, what would be the analytical use of statistics based on such a definition? So we would like, especially from your perspective as the, and I forgot again to introduce you properly, as a Deputy Chief Statistician of the Maldives and the co-chair of our network, we would be particularly interested in your perspective. So Shauda, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Thank you for having me, and a very good day to you all. I think when we look at the poll also, I saw that most people are agreeing that we really need a definition. So looking at, listening to what Mohammed just said, like, how do we measure all these things unless we have a good agreed international definition? So I would say that if we want to make international comparison of the digital economy and see how it is integrating with the different economic activities, we really need a definition so that we can see how countries are faring and make sure that we are able to move together in this aspect of the digital economy. And we see that right now, because there's no agreed definition, although there's a lot going on at different country level, depending on the level of development in the countries, people are trying to measure, so there are many definitions. Even at the international level, there's a lot of research and definitions and frameworks to measure the digital economy. So I think that's where it's very important to have a definition that is internationally agreed. And like you have mentioned, with the COVID pandemic, I think it became a huge push, even for smaller countries like Maldives. We had a lot of innovation, so it's like a catalytic role in pushing us, I think, from our comfort zones. And we in the Maldives, we were dependent on tourism so much, and when we had this devastating effect in the tourism, people who were in the tourist industries, they wanted to do different economic activities. And with the population, we have young population, we have connectivity, and the mobile penetration rates are high. So like we saw a lot of people going on to this, moving on to digital platforms to do their business. So a lot of awareness has actually increased in the country, even in small island countries. But some aspects like the digital literacy, the human capacity, and all these things, I think it plays a huge role and will do on how we are going to be able to maximize the benefits of the socio-economic development with the use of this digital technology. So I think in terms of the policy level, the policymakers need to have some information and to be able to compare countries and see where we are in terms of where we are lagging. We see the shifts in the labor market and bridging the need to access technology. Like even in our case, we have smaller islands where people are like very much removed. So it's like the digital divide. So all these things, I think it's very important to measure how it is affecting the smaller, medium-sized enterprises and the bigger ones. So in order to ensure that the productivity gains in the long run and the country are able to take advantage of this, I think it's very important that at the policy level, we are able to address these challenges in our respective countries so that we don't miss out on this wave, I think. So that's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahuda, and thank you for always sharing your perspective of a SIDS, a small island development state, I mean, and your particular needs, which may be quite different of the perspectives of a geographically large country or a country that has already benefited from a more advanced state of economic development. And then I think that's also here we are trying to bring all perspectives together. So I think we have been traveling east. I just realized. I mean, we started in Europe, and then we went into the Middle East, and then all the way to Asia and the Pacific. Now we're traveling all the way around the world, and we're coming to the Americas. And it's my particular pleasure to introduce my dear colleague and friend, Juan Daniel Oviedo, from the Director General, yes, or President, I wasn't sure, but I think it's Director General of the Statistical Office of Colombia. And we want to talk with him about global and regional priorities for the system of economic statistics. So we are definitely looking into the future now, and who would be better than him talking about global and regional, because you've been the leader of the regional conference of the statisticians of the Americas, and now you're a part of the global board as vice chair of the newly elected vice chair of the Statistical Commission, and bringing your knowledge and wisdom from Latin America to the global table. So, I mean, we are talking all about new activities, behaviors, new skills, new data sources, and the need for more granular statistical indicators and diversity and distribution by geography and population groups. So many topics. Given all of these demands, what, in your opinion, would be some of the top priorities that economic statisticians should focus on, and how could the network enable this work? So I think there it's perhaps also interesting to look at the poll, because that's a very open question. And you can see here on the screen, and thanks for the people, for the colleagues in the background, in particular in Statistics Canada, who help us with this poll to bring us this perspective from the participants here. You can see some of the themes that are identified as top priorities by the audience here, but of course we were also interested in your assessment and your views. So Juan Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and warm hello to you. And also I would like to thank Greg, Rob, and Eric for the presentation. That was very sharp. about the challenges and the main advances of the network of economic statisticians. Regarding the question about how, which is the top priority that we would have currently in economic statistics, I believe that the answer from the poll is very precise. I think that currently when we see the work streams of the network of economic statisticians, the beyond GDP work stream is one of the most challenging ones, because we need to provide answers in this new role that we are trying to develop as national statistical offices, becoming data stewards in our societies. We need to provide, let's say, integral frameworks about how economic growth could have impacts on social well-being or subjective well-being of our citizens. But at the same time, it's also very important to see how this interconnectedness of economic statistics could allow us to provide sound answers about this important topic of global value chains. And in that perspective, I believe that for the production of some economic statistics in our countries, standing alone is not an option anymore. So we need to have very important coordination and collaboration agreements with several stakeholders of our national statistical systems. And that's why I believe that in this top priority that we see at the poll, both well-being and at the same time providing some answers of global value chains, we need the institutional frameworks of these statistics to be very clear and to be very precise, and at the same time to be informed to every stakeholders in our national statistical systems. That's why I believe that the network of economic statisticians plays a very important role there, because when you know this issue of thinking about it, from my perspective, thinking about the network of economic statisticians, we are thinking about how to project or to expand a network governance in the developing of economic statistics that has to be founded on leadership, has to be founded on competence, and at the same time to becoming or defining strong groups between several stakeholders which are at the core of the production of economic statisticians. And there, I believe that governance becomes very important. And this governance is going to be very, very, very important as far as setting these collaboration agreements, for example, with the private sector that we need or we require in order to provide economic statistics, which provide answers for the top priorities of the topics. And in that perspective, I just wanted to take into account the experience of the third sprint of data access that for me, it was very, 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 very important, because when we need to set the challenges of economic statistics as regards as granularity, diversity, inclusion, and at the same time being with a wide scope of what's happening in socioeconomic development, it's very important that we keep in mind that collaboration is not mandatory. Collaboration should be fostered, taking into account the incentives of all the stakeholders which are part of these collaboration agreements. And in the development of the third sprint session, we had a very sound framework under which, first of all, we listened to the private actors in that case. They were private data aggregators of as for example, what was mentioning Floridata, Panjiva, or HTML, and we started to see which were the core business that they were developing in these data aggregation frameworks, and understanding their core business. It's very important for us to see how we are going to collaborate in order to respond to such important challenges. And for me, this was very empowering, because sometimes when we are at the stake of national statistics offices, we want to say, everybody has to provide information to me because I am the National Statistics Office and I have the power to have access to all the information. But this is not the solution anymore. If we want to have, as Mohammed was mentioning, the private sector being part of the production of official statistics. So understanding the incentives is something very important. And I believe that this brings me back to this issue of governance and how we are going to develop a horizontal governance framework for this public-private data sharing of or sharing agreements of information. And at the same time, we need to set a very, very important framework that I believe, and that's why I'm very positive about this, the role of the network of economic statisticians, is we need to foster open dialogues in order to see how we are going to build up together the solution to providing answer to these important challenges of granularity, inclusion, and diversity of the information we are providing. And at the same time, I believe that this topic brings together the challenges to the linking of the 2030 agenda when we are seeing how we are going to provide answer to the social, economic, and environmental challenges under the topic of a circular economy is becoming a very, very important challenge under where we don't have concepts at all. We are building up the concepts, we are building up the indicators, and we need to define which are going to be the sources of information in order to measure the advances of circular economy in our societies. And there we need open dialogues, we need governance frameworks under which we are going to be able to work together, respecting the fundamental principles of official statistics, respecting confidentiality, but working together with the private sector in order to provide sound answers to our society that is looking forward to understanding and appropriating the concept of circular economy. This is the main message that I wanted to share with you, taking advantage of the experience of the sprint sessions that we had the opportunity to manage with Ivo and Rob and some other partners that are today with us. Thank you, Stefan.
Gracias. Thank you, Juan Daniel, for sharing your perspective and emphasizing the importance of leadership and governance. I think these are really some strategic key issues that we need to look at in the future. So the last, but certainly not least, panelist is Ms. Jackie Vitas from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Australia, of course, has a long tradition of being good internationalists and providing their experience to the rest of the world, and working quite closely with some of the countries of their region and other countries around the world. So we want to tap into that wealth of knowledge and wisdom, focusing on the topic of international frameworks for well-being and inclusive wealth measures. I mean, we have heard a lot about multi-dimensional statistics, different areas of statistics coming together. But how do we do that, really? How can we actually achieve that? So how can we break down the institutional silos between the collection and compilation of the three big areas, social, economic, and environment statistics, so that we get integrated products and can look at the world in a more integrated fashion? Perhaps you could give us some examples of how you are doing it in Australia, how you have approach that topic, and what promising extensions of the statistical framework for economic statistics, including the socio-demographic dimensions, can we think of? Should we consider developing a system of socio-economic accounting, complementing the system of environmental accounting that we already have, in order to develop a more comprehensive measure of inclusive wealth? Jackie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. And before I start, I'd like to propose a new topic for the network to think about, which is a statistician's passion index, because I think maybe it would be useful to have something like that in these forums. So I wanted to just start off, first of all, thinking about the silos that we work in, and it's been touched on in many of the panelists' comments today. So we've grown up with these silos of economic, social, population, environmental, and we see those across our international committees, our international working groups, and many of our statistical organizations are structured around those silos as well. And I'll give you kind of an illustration of that. So many years ago, I moved from methodology to national accounts. Methodologists and national accounts were all in the same building. When I walked into the room with the national accounts, I would say 80% of them I had never seen in my life. You just did not mix, you did not cross the borders. So that was an illustration, I think, in terms of we do very much stay within our own thematic silos. So the key question tapping into the network and what we're trying to do here is about how do we increase that collaboration and communication across these traditional themes. And I could go more radical and say maybe we should just blow up all these themes and reimagine the whole kind of topic base, but I'm not going to go there today. But I do think that we've got some real catalysts here for increasing collaboration and communication across the themes. So obviously we've got the updates to SNA, BPM, Government Financial Statistics Manuals. So there's a natural catalyst here that we could be using to try and break down some of those barriers between the different silos. But from a data acquisition perspective, touching on the different things that have been mentioned today in terms of we have this huge potential for untapping, and I'm going to call it non-survey data, so it could be private sector or public sector. We have this huge potential, most probably more so than ever, to actually collaborate around the use of this non-survey data. So if I think about what we're doing in Australia, we've been in a very privileged position since the start of the pandemic to actually have access to de-identified, aggregated bank transaction data. And in the first instance, it was used solely for validating national accounts, household final consumption expenditure. And then as we built the relationships with the banks and we got to understand the data a little bit more, we looked at, okay, how else could we use this data? And so now in February, we published our first monthly household spending indicator using that data. And now we're looking at even further and saying, actually, there's potential here that we could use it to replace or partially replace some of the data that we've traditionally collected via our income and our expenditure surveys. So suddenly we're crossing boundaries between national accounts and social statistics. And I think this is the catalyst that could actually help us break down some of these traditional silos, is as we get to understand that data, the potential uses of that data, the methods that we need to use to actually, produce estimates from this data. And if we do it in a more kind of cross-thematic approach, learning from one another across the themes, as well as across internationally within, say, the economic domain, then we really could try and break down some of these artificial barriers that we have created around ourselves. So that was one thing that I just wanted to kind of give the experience of from an Australian perspective. Also in Australia, we've got lots of opportunities, not just within the Australian Bureau of Statistics, but also at an Australia level. So we've got things like an Australia data strategy. which obviously gives us huge opportunities. We've got something called consumer data rights, where it's a government initiative where consumers can actually opt in to provide their data to accredited service providers, and their data can be shared and they can look at the best products and services for them as individuals. And the ABS is actually looking at whether we can be an accredited service provider for surveys. So this is something that's be quite groundbreaking if we can pursue that. And then we've got something called the Digital Atlas of Australia. And again, this is bringing together what was typically different domains. So we have our Geoscience Australia agency working in collaboration with the Australian Bureau of Statistics to actually create a three-dimensional digital atlas of Australia. So we're bringing together a wealth of government-held data sets and looking at it from a people perspective, an economy perspective, and an environmental perspective as well. So again, there's lots that can be learned from that initiative. I just wanted to finish off. So the big question that you posed, Stefan, about, should we be going as far as a socio-economic accounting framework? I was like, okay, this is the million-dollar question, or one of them. I love looking back at history about how we got to where we are today. And when I was kind of looking back through things, I was reading a paper that Anne Harrison had done, and she referenced that in 1981, a paper actually came to UNSC, which was actually calling for a socio-economic framework. And I'll just quote a little bit from this paper. So it says, national accounts shouldn't be conceived of as a framework not only for macro data, but for micro data as well. The ultimate objective should be over all statistical systems embracing economic, social, demographic and environmental statistics, and national accounts should be the integrating role to all of that. So it made me think then, well, 41 years later, why haven't we done this? Because it's hard. And there's kind of 5 things that came to mind about why it's hard. So I think one, to get political attention and buy-in is very, very difficult. So we all talk about, the overuse of GDP as one of the kind of key aggregates, but we have to get that political attention and buy-in, or we're still going to be here in another 41 years having the same debate. We need for us to agree what the focus is. There's so many different elements to it, but what is it that we're actually talking about, and what do we want to have in this framework, tying that up with the user perspective as well. We need to obviously develop a framework that we can then go out and talk to our users. And when I say our users, we do our consultation very often within our statistical community. So if I use BPN and SNA updates, we send the questionnaires out to NSOs or NSIs, whichever hemisphere you're in. And sometimes people will consult with, other agencies, other parts of government, other times they don't. But ultimately, we're producing this for our users. So we need to take that framework and actually talk to our users about it. How would they use it? Otherwise, we won't get their buy-in, and ultimately, they sign the check that pays our wages. We then need to think about experimenting and populating it, and as part of the consultation and experimentation, getting people to see, our users to actually see the true value of having some of these other aggregates, and how would they use them to monitor different aspects of the economy or society, or to help them make policy and to monitor policy. So my kind of key message really thinking about this was that if we really want to get beyond GDP, we have to get beyond the views of statistical organisations. We have to truly put our users into the centre of what we're considering and getting their feedback, and do user-centred design in terms of taking this debate forward. Because in 41 years' time, hopefully I still won't be working, but if I am, I would have liked us to have progressed this debate a little bit. So that's all I have to say, Stefan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you also for not only taking us on a geographical journey today, but also on a history journey. And as usual, we are a bunch of statisticians, so I mean, a couple of numbers stick out that I will probably frightening numbers that I will remember from this discussion. One is the 18 zeros that Mohammed mentioned. I'm still trying to fit that on my table. And the 41 years that you just mentioned. So I think those will be a couple of things that will stick in my mind. Okay, the bad news is we are out of time for this event, but I just didn't really want, to stop our panelists who were so inspiring with their various perspectives and coming from different vantage points and parts of the world. I hope we whet your appetite. The good news is we are not out of time in discussing in the network of economic statisticians. Quite on the contrary, there is a lot still to come. There are thematic sprints, there are new topics that you and everybody can shape being part of this. So I hope I'm almost, don't accuse me of having done this by design if I abort this wonderful discussion at this point and leave you all hanging a little bit. But there's a little bit of intention behind that. So we hope that you would be coming back because we have the various platforms for continuing these discussions. If it's data access that gets your juices flowing, there's the information in the chat. That is tomorrow morning from a New York perspective right away. If it's beyond GDP, there are quite a number of sessions coming. And if it's any of the other topics, and there are many of them, just watch this space, or even better, get involved. I mean, because we really want everybody to be part of this global discussion. It is a network. The design is we want to keep it light, nimble, and agile. You heard that several times. We want to talk about cutting edge themes. You heard a couple of key issues. I mean, addressing what is really on everybody's mind: cooperate, coordinate, co-invest, user consultations. There is more to come, so watch this space. The world has changed in a way. It's become a much more complicated world, so that may be a bad news. But the good news is, and I hope you felt that today, things are already happening left, right, and center in different parts of the world. People and groups have taken approaches to solving the problems, and we are in this together. I think that's what is the really good news. And to pick up Dominic's ambitious task, I mean, it's not stop of leaving no one behind. Let's put everyone in the front. I hope you enjoyed our journey around the world and around the world of economic statistics this morning. You also heard a new statistical challenge being launched for us methodologically is to develop the Statistician's Passion Index. I'm already working on that and see who wins the prize. Today, it would be definitely very difficult to decide that, which takes me to thanking all of my panelists and the introducers. Because it was a really very inspiring morning for me, and I'm not even at my second cup of coffee here. But I really enjoyed it, and I hope so did you. Please come back if you want more. As I said, our website will provide, the UNSD website for the network will provide you with all of the information. And so let me just ask whether there was anybody of the partners, in particular Greg and Shahuda as the co-chairs of the global network, who would want to say some final words.
If I can just, thank you, Stefan, just pile on. I mean, Jackie's sort of closing off with the notion of busting down silos, I think is key, right? And everyone else has talked about drawing links with the private sector, drawing better links with users, and that whole notion of collaboration being really, really, really important. So that's exactly where we need to be and where we need to go. I'll pile on to Stefan's kind of call to action. A network without nodes isn't really a network, right? It's just kind of a point. So in order for us to move forward, right, we need to work collectively and collaboratively. I like Dominic's notion of sort of inclusiveness, but let me kind of amplify that, right? Our traditional notion of who is, so-called sort of advanced and who is so-called, not so advanced in the new environment is absolutely meaningless. You may have, countries with older statistical offices that are latched on to legacy systems and are reluctant to drag themselves forward into the, well, never mind 21st century, the 20th century. In which case, newer statistical offices that may be more nimble have latched on to advanced technologies faster. And in which case, it's your offices like ours need that capacity building in order to, learn from these experiences, so we can springboard ourselves sort of into action. So that partnership and collaboration is going to be key. We are going to kind of be launching events as we move ahead, and your partnership, collaboration, participation will be essential in making this a success.
Well, thank you very much for those words. Shahuda, would you like to say a few words? I hope from your perspective also this was useful and inspiring.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was really very inspiring, and it's the same issues that we are also thinking. So I think it really helped with the pandemic and the sharing of knowledge, this collaboration that is going on. I think it is really helping countries all over the world. So I think it's going to be very exciting to move forward with this economic statisticians sprints and see how together we can, I think we can do a lot more. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Greg, and everyone.
Well, thank you all for putting it together. And let me then launch one last challenge to all of us to bear in the back of our minds. I'm not a sprinter, and I said that before. I love that we are starting with sprints, and I think it's working very, very well. But I'm thinking a little bit also how we can turn that into a marathon at the end of the day. And because that's a little bit at my advanced age, I can't keep up with these young people sprinting. But when it's about running longer distances, I have at least a little bit of a chance. So how do we turn that in something more sustainable? I mean, I think that is also in the back of all of our minds. And in a way, we have tomorrow the first opportunity of doing just that, because our first sprint on data access comes to an end, and we will have to spend a little bit of time thinking tomorrow how, as we finish that first package of excitement, we translate some of the conclusions into some ongoing activities, and then the idea of who is doing what, who is well positioned, who can take care of something, and who can continue to lead it will become relevant questions. So as you can all see, this is very exciting, as Shahuda just said. These are moving targets, and the good news I hope you took away from today is we are in this all together, and there are a lot of, as I already said, competent, eloquent, and nice people around the world working with us on this together. So on this note, thank you very much to all the lead persons who put this together. The ones that organized the early sprints, Greg and Jahuda as the co-leads, all of the panelists for bringing their perspectives, and all of you, my team in the background, under the leadership of Ivo, Havinka, for putting this together, and all of you for being here today. And I hope this was just really an appetizer, and I hope to see you very soon here again. Please take care of yourselves around the world, and have a good day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Bye.